Local NPC deputies say doors still open on political reform. Explosion rocks Yuen Long flat. And counting the cost of U.S. military operations in Iraq.
Good evening. Local National People's Congress deputies say there will still be room for discussion after the NPC Standing Committee announces the framework for political reform tomorrow. This includes the composition of the nominating committee in the 2017 chief executive election. Evelina Lung has our top story.
The long wait is finally coming to an end. The National People's Congress Standing Committee will be announcing the framework for Hong Kong's political reform tomorrow. Today, Standing Committee members were briefed by Basic Law Committee Chairman Li Fei in Beijing before a vote on the draft plan. Sources say the announcement by the NPC Standing Committee will set a 50% threshold for CE candidates among nominating committee members and set the number of candidates at 2 or 3. It will also say the formation of the nominating committee will be modeled after the election committee in the 2012 vote. A number of local NPC delegates pointed out that means not everything is set in stone. For example, the way nominating committee members is chosen could still be up for discussion. Ikpot Him stressed the NPC Standing Committee will just be unveiling the general principles of constitutional development. Another local NPC delegate, David Wong, said the lack of a consensus now means the prospects of implementing universal suffrage in future are bleak. Here in Hong Kong, Civic Party lawmaker Ronnie Tong echoed Wong's views, warning universal suffrage would not be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years if the reform proposal is not passed. And Occupy Central organizer Benny Tai said the civil disobedience movement will go ahead if Beijing leaves no room for further discussion. Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference Standing Committee member and Tsingtao Group chairman Charles Ho has also waded into the discussion. In an interview with TVB News, he said he doesn't believe Beijing is trying to screen out pan-democratic CE candidates. He did say the central government is worried about the election of a CE who does not love Hong Kong or the country. Evelyn Leung, TVB News.
5 people were injured in an explosion this afternoon at a flat in Yuen Long. It is suspected 3 youngsters tried to cook at home, causing a gas explosion. Their mother's been arrested on suspicion of child negligence. Liz Yoon reports.
Several window frames and an air conditioner fell from the flat. Shattered glass on the ground too. The third floor flat sustained heavy damage. This woman said she heard a loud bang and saw people running away from the building. Another person said there were not as many passers-by as usual when the explosion occurred shortly after 1 this afternoon. Police officers cordoned off the area for further investigation. 5 people were injured in the incident. They were sent to Tuen Mun and Pok Koi hospitals. Based on preliminary investigation, it is expected that 3 youngsters tried to cook with a lighter, causing the explosion. Liz Yun, TVB News.
Wednesday's fire that swept through a public housing unit in Kwun Tong has claimed another life. An 8-month-old baby girl died today, raising the number of dead to 4. The baby girl had been in critical condition at United Christian Hospital. She was pronounced dead this morning. Her mother and 2 brothers, aged 2 and 5, were killed in the blaze. The father was injured. Authorities say the fire was not suspicious.
In other news, ATV has expressed confidence that its free-to-air TV license will be renewed. The issue was believed to be on the agenda of a Communications Authority meeting today. Stephanie Choi reports.
Among those who attended today's meeting were Communications Authority Chairman Ambrose Ho, Commerce and Economic Development Bureau Permanent Secretary Ho Shuk-yi, and Authority member Raymond Wong. Sources say ATV's license renewal application was discussed at the meeting. And in a telephone interview, ATV Executive Director Ip Kapo said that he's confident the application would be successful. He explained that Hong Kong needs a free TV station like ATV because it is part of Hong Kong's collective memory and that the company has always acted with conscience. On the station's financial situation, Ip said ATV can provide evidence it'll have $2.7 billion in funding over the next 6 years. He has yet to reveal the source of the funding, but said ATV will hand over further details on its finances to the Communications Authority next week. The free-to-air TV licenses held by TVB and ATV will expire on November 30th next year. Earlier this year, the Communications Authority held public hearings on the renewal of licenses. According to the Broadcasting Ordinance, the Communications Authority will have to submit its proposal for the free TV license renewal applications to the Chief Executive and the Executive Council by the end of November this year. Stephanie Choi, TVB News.
Overseas now, in American military operations in Iraq, including airstrikes and surveillance flights, have cost about $560 million since June. The Pentagon says the operations against Islamic State militants have escalated and the $7.5 million daily average will rise. Alan Booknia reports.
The U.S. Defense Department released video of one of the latest airstrikes on an Islamic State armed truck this week. According to the Pentagon, there have been about 110 strikes since June. U.S. President Barack Obama has also raised the option of expanding the military operation to Syria, where government troops are struggling to fight off Islamic State militants. But he added there was no immediate strategy to do that. Britain, meanwhile, has raised its terrorism threat level to severe, the second highest level.
Good afternoon.
British Prime Minister David Cameron said the murder of U.S. journalist David Foley and the apparent involvement of a British man was clear evidence of the threat posed by Islamic State to the UK.
Now, people are rightly concerned about so-called foreign fighters who've travelled from Britain to Syria and Iraq, taken part in terrorist acts, and now come back to threaten our security here at home. And the scale of this threat is growing.
Cameron admits there are gaps in Britain's armory to combat terror and suspected terrorists and vowed to plug them.
We need to do more to stop people travelling, to stop those who do go from returning, and to deal decisively with those who are already here.
In Washington, a White House spokesman said there's no evidence Islamic State is plotting an attack inside the United States.
That said, it is important that we take the steps that are necessary, and as a part of the President's comprehensive strategy, to deny them a safe haven that would give them the kind of comfort that they would need to consider plotting those kinds of attacks.
Ernest said there are no plans right now to raise the terrorism threat warning level in the U.S. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Fighting has intensified in Ukraine's embattled east, where pro-Russian rebels have gained more control of key areas. Ukrainian President Petro Poroshenko is urging the European Union to deter Russia from supporting the rebels. But Russian President Vladimir Putin denies the allegation and warned aggressors not to mess with a nuclear-armed Russia.
This was the aftermath in Donetsk, where several bombs hit a railway station and a trolley bus, injuring a number of people. The fighting intensified after pro-Russian rebels pushed Ukrainian troops out of the strategic coast along the Sea of Azov. But Kiev has pledged to fight on. Ukraine's national security spokesman vowed they will never surrender or kneel to Russia. At a NATO meeting, the president of Romania pushed to even the playing field. In addition to imposing new sanctions on Russia, he called on the alliance to supply Ukraine with better arms. NATO says these pictures prove Moscow violated Ukraine's sovereignty by crossing the border illegally to support pro-Russian rebels. A global security monitor believes this amateur video of a Russian army tank in a Ukrainian rebel convoy indicates Moscow is supplying arms to pro-Russian separatists. Allegations Russia adamantly denies.
It's not the first time allegations have been made. From the very beginning of the crisis, we've been blamed for everything.
More than 2,500 people have been killed in the crisis so far. The UN is worried that the daily death toll has surged because armed groups are preventing civilians from leaving.
That there is effectively a reign of fear and terror within these pocket areas controlled by the armed groups. That has not changed.
Speaking at a Kremlin-organized youth camp, Russian President Vladimir Putin put the blame on the Ukrainian army. Putin compared the Ukrainian government's efforts to put down the separatist uprising to the Nazi siege of Leningrad during the Second World War.
In Jalalabad, Afghanistan, at least 6 people were killed and dozens wounded in fighting after a suicide car bomb attack. After the bombing outside the Office of Afghan Intelligence, Taliban insurgents stormed the building, setting off an intense gunfight. Taliban militants have stepped up attacks across Afghanistan in recent weeks. The violence coincides with a political deadlock in the capital of Kabul. Rival presidential candidates have been unable to resolve months of disputes over an election that was meant to mark the first democratic transfer of